I think the biggest misconception is like, you heard me say betting on yourself, where you feel like you have to own everything and do everything. And coming from a corporate background where you have teams and you have HR and you got payroll and you got all these kind of things, and then you're looking, when you go on your own to go recreate that on your own, you feel like you have to wear all of those hats.
Yeah.
That frees you up to do the work that doesn't feel like work. It feels like flow. You can't tell the difference between work and play with somebody who does this really well. Looks like they're just having fun all the time.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Tyler Lux, a serial entrepreneur. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Oh, Kelsey, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, excited to have you. So Tyler, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Oh my gosh. So how I get to that answer a lot of times with people is talk about my passions sometimes. So my passions for me include my family. I've got a wife and 3 kids, and they include a lot of travel. So those 2 big categories of passions really help answer, like, who am I? What do I do? I own businesses. I've started and run and operate several businesses that we'll discuss. But for me, the passions of my life are, I try to be varsity as a husband. I try to be varsity status as a father. And then I try to be like expert level ninja status as a world traveler and experiencing all the beauty that this world has to offer. So I've had the opportunity to travel to over 35 countries. Most of them would be categorized in that third world country, not vacation type experiences, very much like off the beaten path. In Africa, I've been 3 times.
Wow.
I've been all over Southeast Asia. We own a property in Mexico, and just learning different people, cultures, backgrounds, those kind of things have really shaped who I am as a person from a very young age. I started doing that. I tell people this story sometimes, Kelsey, is I was 12 years old. So think about yourself when you were 12, or if you know a kid who's 12 years old right now. At 12 years old, I flew to Africa with my father. We were doing some AIDS relief and some medical trips and some nonprofit work in Africa. I flew out there with him. I flew back by myself from Malawi, which is Southern Africa. I flew all the way back from Africa by myself. And that was pre-technology and everything. You had paper tickets that you carried with you, all that kind of stuff. So that kind of story sometimes can frame up of like the type of person that I am.
Yeah, wow. So you're talking 6th grade, really, just kind
Yes.
of, that's amazing. So
Yeah.
it sounds like you've always had a passion for traveling and kind of, so tell me how this entrepreneurial kind of spirit came about.
Absolutely. So I spent 15 years in what you would call corporate America, climbing my way up a ladder with health and fitness companies, the big ones. And they moved me and my family all across the country. We were able to say yes to that and have new experiences and meet new people and have new networks of growth and opportunity. But at some point, for most people, that comes to an end, right? And you go, I kind of need to bet on myself at some point. I'm building and helping build maybe somebody else's dream or somebody else's expectations. And I'm so incredibly grateful for the years that I spent with those companies. They treated me so well. I learned so much along the way that have led to this entrepreneurial side of what I've gotten to do the last 5+ years.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that really kicked off and probably was the big catalyst to entrepreneurship. And of course, just being a little bit of that risk taker in my DNA, and travel being a part of that risk taking.
So like we kind of started in the intro, you're a serial entrepreneur. So tell me kind of what are the different, entrepreneurial adventures that you're juggling right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say 3 verticals, and they're kind of different in different industries. when I tell people that I'm in mortgages and in like finance, so to speak, in that real estate vertical, it surprises people sometimes because they would expect me to be like a real estate agent, a little bit more gregarious, outgoing. And in that sense, nope, I'm a lender. I own my own mortgage brokerage. And we started that about 5 years ago, and it's seen different iterations over time. And then along the way, having that health and fitness background, with a great partner of mine, we launched a franchise in Northern Colorado called DBAT. And that's an acronym. It stands for Developing Beliefs, Attitudes, and Traditions. And it is a baseball softball academy with sports performance. So I get to be around youth and kids and making themselves better. And that's a whole business that I own, run, and operate. And then I do organizational leadership development with one-on-one coaching with CEOs, C-levels, executives, things like that.
Wow. So 3 very different, but all in their own amazing ventures that you're on. Talk to me a little bit about how, well, I guess we'll start with, the mortgage or DBAT, or, like you said, your professional kind of development. How have you been able to grow each of those businesses into what they are today?
Oh, great. Love that question. I think it's the question that we ask ourselves so often is, okay, I'm starting something, or I want to go start something, or maybe I'm seeing some stalling in growth, right? Everything is like, how do you go grow those things? And it sounds like such a cliche answer, but the thing that comes front of mind for me, Kelsey, is relationships. And not in the generic sense, but I truly believe that servant leadership is so missed in business. We talk about it a lot. We understand the concepts around it, but actually doing it and hiring people around you that allow you to do it. So the growth that we've been able to see in the mortgage industry, a tough year this last year for a lot of people. It was a record year for us. Same thing with our baseball and softball academy franchise. We won franchise of the year this last year. Yeah, some pretty fun stuff, but it's all truly done through relationship. And what I mean by that is taking a genuine interest in the person in front of you, whether that's the real estate agent that's on the phone with you or the kid you're doing a lesson with, developing and coaching your team to be able to take an interest in what we call the other person that's in front of you, and that you're right where your feet are planted, right here, right now. What is that file or that person in front of you, and taking a genuine interest in them and making it about them. We found that when you do that consistently over time, it allows for a lot of different things. It allows you to not have to do a heavy lead spend and going and buying leads and lead conversion and the cold call leads side of things. It allows you to have high retention of clients. And we really get very specific with all of my employees across all businesses on what building relationships looks like.
Do you think that social media and the internet has changed the way that we portray and have our interpersonal relationships?
Oh my gosh, what a great loaded question. Let me tell you a story. So I have a 14-year-old, I have a 12-year-old, and then I got a 6-year-old. So right now, we all know kids of all ages have cell phones. My kids literally just a couple weeks ago for Christmas got their first cell phones, my 14 and my 12-year-old. They got their first cell phones, and all they can do is text and call. There's nothing else on there for them for this very reason. I can't tell you the growth that I've seen in my kids, and of course everybody wants to dote on their own kids, but what they've been able to accomplish because of that lack of distraction. The greatest compliment that I receive consistently about my own children is parents, coaches, teachers. They tell me, hey, when I talk to your kids, they look me in the eyes. They listen to what I'm saying. They ask really good questions. They're genuinely curious about whatever is going on in that moment. Great relationships. And I think that not having social media, not being tied to this incredible device that we all kind of are dependent on now, really helping them form their prefrontal cortex in their brain and allowed it to develop. I could go geek out about this for hours and ever and ever, and sounds like you could as well. But we talk about this in our businesses with our employees, is that those things are tools. They are not life. That's not how we live. It's just a tool for us to find a way to make a true, genuine connection. But absolutely, I could not agree more that social media, internet platforms, all that kind of stuff are absolute distractions to real living in real life, and then being able to accomplish real business results and financials.
Yeah. So Tyler, what would you say would be the biggest misconception kind of about entrepreneurship? Because you've been there, it sounds like you've really worked your way through it. We talked a little bit about the struggles of social media and, working on those interpersonal relationships. What would you say the biggest misconception people have?
That's a good question. I think what typically pops up is this idea of long hours, a lot of struggle, a lot of sleepless nights. And I think that there are moments and seasons where those things are real and they can happen. But where I think the biggest misconception is like, you heard me say betting on yourself, where you feel like you have to own everything and do everything. And coming from a corporate background where you have teams and you have HR and you got payroll and you got all these kind of things, and then you're looking, when you go on your own to go recreate that on your own, you feel like you have to wear all of those hats. And there's so many incredible people out there that are categorical experts at the thing that you may not be good at, that you need to go solve for and pay somebody else to go do, that frees you up to do the work that doesn't feel like work. It feels like flow. You can't tell the difference between work and play with somebody who does this really well. Looks like they're just having fun all the time. At everything that they're doing. And like, you're like, oh, it must be nice, right? Or, oh man, does that guy ever work? Yeah, they're probably working really hard, but they're working on the things that fire them up.
And that they care about and have a passion for.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit about kind of this, and correct me if I'm using the wrong terminology, but this professional development, kind of leadership, mentorship realm of your life. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Talk to me a little bit about the demographics on who you serve in that, like your audience. Tell me just more about it.
Yeah. So right now I'll tell you another story. So I'm working with a client right now who's an executive at a Fortune 50 company, and he's really I only work on referral based with this. I don't broadcast it. I don't advertise it. I like keeping it small with a few amount of clients so I can give really great focused attention. And they end up becoming, of course, incredible friends and colleagues over the years. But this client of mine is struggling with staffing right now, and identifying the right talent and finding that right talent, and how to, maybe are we coming up with new processes and procedures? And so that's what he came to me for. What we ended up talking about, and we continue to talk about and coach on, is his morning routine. Something completely different than what we're doing, but he wanted to solve for X. I knew we needed to solve for Y after getting to know him. So we have really dove into his personal routine, schedules, habits, all of those things that allow him to fire on all cylinders. Can I go give him the answers that, from my experience, of like, here's how to go staff for a great team, here's a great interview guide that you can use? Yeah, I can go give him that, but I'd much rather go help him sharpen his mind and him come up with better answers that I'll ever get. But how can I help him go get there? It's like, hey, we're talking about like, hey, well, what time do you think you should be going to bed? What time should you wake up? What is the routine that you go through? What is the nutrition and the diet and all that kind of stuff that you're putting into your body to prime yourself for a day of high level problem solving that you got to go do?
Yeah. That's really interesting. So how has COVID kind of affected all of your businesses? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so it enhanced all of businesses across the board.
Yeah.
And it was solely due to mentality, right? And this mentality came to me from a leader and a mentor that I had when I was a young man. And I was doing sales. I'm on the phone, and he was like an area director at this company, and he calls me up and he's like, "Hey, how's it going in there today?" Because it was a snow day. We're in Colorado,
Yeah.
and it was a snow day. Nobody's out doing anything. Of course, traffic is low, so we're expected to hit the phones and dial and
Yeah.
set appointments and do all that kind of fun stuff. And I'm like, well, I start talking about the weather. We haven't had many walk-ins and people coming in and wanting to do this and that and all that kind of stuff. He's like, he just was quiet and he listened to me make all my excuses. And then he says, well, what is the exact temperature and type of weather that you guys need to have in order to hit your goals? And I was like, okay. And over the years, since being a young man, I was in my early 20s at the time, I've really adopted a lot of Stoic principles from the early Stoics. And what that has taught me is that there is never perfect moments or time for anything. And so the turbulence and everything we experienced within COVID, what that created was the people who had excuses and wanted to go lean on those excuses for a lack of production or effort or whatever it was that they were trying to accomplish. And then the people who saw it as an opportunity. Oh, this is my opportunity to go gain market share. So we doubled down. We spent more. We did everything kind of the opposite of what a lot of people were doing in our businesses. I mean, we were in storefront business at this time where there was no supply chain. We couldn't get 2x4s to build a wall. So, we saw these things as opportunities to catapult past our competition.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really fascinating. So going from there, talk to me a little bit more about DBATs.
Yeah. So we have a mission at DBAT, and that mission is to create a sense of belonging for every single person who walks in, and then maybe they get better as an athlete. That's literally our mission statement.
Yeah.
Like, okay, yeah, maybe they become better as an athlete. Maybe they make the team. Maybe they become a pro. Who knows? We don't know. But we don't care about that. We want to create a culture when that young kid walks in, when that young girl walks in for the first time or the 100th time, that they feel like they belong. Because when you're coming into like a sports training facility, there can be that competition that's there. We don't actually have competitions in our facilities, which makes it even better because people are just coming to show up to make themselves better. But creating this sense of belonging where I feel like I'm valued, like I'm good right where I'm at today, and maybe I'll get a little bit better, right? And so we have so many products and services that we have in here. Of course, we do one-on-one instruction. Of course, we have camps and clinics and facilities for people to go train and do those kind of things. But it really literally starts, the crux of our business is when that person walks through our front doors and greet them, and hopefully we remember them by their first name. But if we don't, we're making a genuine connection with them there, and then taking it from there.
Yeah. So how did you know that you were on the right path to success? Now, not only with DBAT, but with also your other ventures.
I think you're on the right path when you see the people closest to you really genuinely leaning in and supporting you, and because they believe in what you're doing, and it's a clear sign. There's two things, right? That's the good, the feel good, clear sign you're on the right path in life. The people that are closest to you, they're fired up about what you're excited about and what you're doing. And they're curious and always asking questions. I think pay close attention to those people. And then the other one is just obstacles. If it's easy and it feels good, you are on the wrong road. You want to be on the road where there's boulders right in the middle, and you got to go figure out how to go up and down and around. Like when you are running against friction and you're seeing that consistently, it's usually a good sign that that's the path. Like you are on the right path.
Yeah.
My favorite author is Ryan Holiday. The obstacle is the way. And he talks about this very, very thing. And it's truly a reframing for most people, where it's like running it against all these tough things, and I can't, and this is hard, and this is difficult. Those are probably actually signs pointing you're on the path. Keep going. Go
Yeah.
get through that.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of what you've talked about has been centered around relationships. Relationships both interpersonal, intrapersonal, relationships in general. Do you think that's one of the most indispensable tools that someone can have, is the ability to have, maintain, and curate relationships?
Oh, for sure. For sure. It for me, can I tell one more story?
Oh my, tell them all. Tell them
Okay.
all.
This will be my favorite story I tell today. So I'm 10 years old. I'm in the middle of a cornfield in a small town, Iowa. I'm with my grandfather. My son's named after him. I'm with my grandfather and we're digging irrigation ditches. And he's down in the ditch. And by this time, he's an old man. I mean, he's got to be 70s, but World War II veteran, Marine, was in education for 30 years, coach, principal, just an unbelievable man, my all-time hero. So we're there. He's got his overalls on. It's in the middle of July. It is hotter than heck, humid. He's digging. He's down in the hole digging, and I'm standing up above him asking questions. What we're doing right now. I'm just curious, right? Like I'm asking questions and I'm talking to him, and he's working.
Yeah.
And at some point, Kelsey, he stops. He turns around and he looks up at me and takes a dirty handkerchief out of the front pocket of his overalls, wipes the sweat off, probably blows his nose in it too, puts it back in his pocket, and he goes, "You know what, son? I could hear you a lot better if you were down here with me." And at the time, it was so confusing for me, and I didn't understand, and he never explained what that phrasing meant. But as I got older, it was a pillar moment for me. It was a milestone moment in my life that I always get to revert back to, in that if you want to get real work done, you got to be down in the trench with somebody, doing the work with them. And so telling people, in sending out an email or direction or something like that, if we know that building relationships is key to business and growing a business, well, then how do you go build relationship with your team first, right? Make sure that you're good at that. Well, how do you go build relationship with your team? Do the work with them. Don't show them one time. Like, go be in the trenches with them. Go get dirty, get your hands dirty with them. And while you're doing work with somebody, you get to know them as a person. Oh, how long did you live there? Where'd you go? Like, now we're working together. There's something beautiful about human nature when we do work together, how it pulls us and draws us closer. So then when that moment is done, especially when your team and employees, whatever, you go back out, they understand this as well. And so you're in the fight with them. You're in the good and the bad times with them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I don't want to butcher it, but Teddy Roosevelt once said something to the effect of, like, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And it sounds like that kind of really resonates with what your grandfather was saying, and also to, your leadership style.
Without a doubt. And what I love that quote. I always, it's like, well, how do you show care? And I think with our teams and with our people, with our families, it's so important that you define what care looks like. Because care, for most people, if you ask them, hey, write down a definition of care, what does it look like? What could you sense it being? It's a hug or a high five or a compliment or, words of edification or gratitude. But most of the time, true care, to me, comes down to this. And I'll give you an example. You walked into work today and you saw some coworkers, probably, right? If you had a booger hanging out of your nose, the person who cared about you the most was the person who told you about it. But you probably walked by 10 other people who didn't tell you, like, you got a bat in the cave, you got a booger hanging out of your nose. Like, you need to get that, right? But the person who cared about you the most, they're the one who was like, hey, Kelsey, like, you got to get that out, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how we define care in our businesses and in the businesses that I own, operate, and oversee. Is care doesn't always look like a high five or a hug. Sometimes it's like, hey, I need more out of you. Hey, that's not acceptable. Let me help you get better. It's those type of things. Like, I think defining care, like Teddy did, is such a beautiful quote and used everywhere. But what is care, and what does care really look like? Sometimes care is like, I did this with an employee probably 2-3 months ago, and they had just had an unbelievable year. They're working so hard. They had all kinds of stuff going on. And I just said, hey, you have the next month off. You're not coming into work. No, I got all this. I already got it covered. I already got it put together. But you're taking the next month off. So your email is actually going to be shut off on Friday at 4 p.m. And so I don't want to hear from you. I don't want to talk to you for 30 days.
Wow.
Just care.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to recognize that it looks different for everybody. How you receive care and how you give care is very different. But I think it's important, from a leadership perspective of kind of what I'm hearing for you is to be very explicit with your directions, to be explicit with what your expectations are, and to be explicit with everything that you do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's setting clear expectations and holding accountability. We all think we set clear expectations, but people are different learners, like you just said. Like, people consume content in different ways. So know that, but then do a lot of teach back. Like, hey, what is your understanding of what we covered today in that Zoom meeting or that conversation or that video or whatever it was? What was your understanding? And if it's like so far off, then it's not that's not that person's fault. We didn't deliver the message in the right way for them to absorb it. So we can then go hold accountability to the expectation.
That's really great. And that's great insight too. And I think, everything you've said really resonates with you being an entrepreneur, you being successful with what you've done over the years, and kind of how everything from your childhood and your childhood stories have led you to this precipice of where you are now. But so Tyler, as we kind of wrap up, what would be one thing that you would want to leave our listeners with, either, about NEXA Mortgage, about DBATs, or about your consulting company, or life in general? What would you want to leave our listeners with?
Oh my gosh, this is like the question Tim Ferriss asks. If you got a billboard and you could give it to, and millions of people would see it, what would you say? And I've thought about this so many times and listening to some of his content. But for me right now in this season, it would be people committing to maniacal self-care.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So I think self-care always starts with movement and moving your body. And that could be walking around the block or whatever, crushing a CrossFit workout. I don't do that, but anything that involves our bodies exercising and moving, because then I think everything else kind of flows from that point. And you go do some of that stuff, then you don't want to eat junk food. You don't want to go ruin a good workout or that exercise. But then maniacal self-care with your mental health. What are you specifically doing daily for your mental health? What is that? Is it mindfulness? Is it meditation? Is it reading? Is it journaling? Like, what are those things that you're doing there? And then the emotional health side of things.
Yeah.
So many different things that come into play, but a maniacal focus on self-care and defining what that looks like for you and committing to it. Because then everything else falls in place. Everything else just, it's funny. Like, you go back and look at your life and career and everything. You're like, when were the moments that I was in a flow state, or I was incredibly fulfilled? Maybe not always happy, right? Because there's struggle and that gets involved with that too. But when were those moments? And I guarantee you had a great balance or focus on those kind of things.
That's a great little bit to leave our listeners with. Well, Tyler, this has been a great conversation about entrepreneurship in general, all of your different adventures. I really appreciate you taking the time, to get a little philosophical with me and take a few steps back on life and on Beyond Business Ninjas today.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on, and looking forward to more interactions and conversations.
I agree.